I never thought buying a simple ring would change my life, but it did. My name is Clara, and I'm a senior physics student at the University of Chicago. For as long as I can remember, I've always believed that science explains everything. Nothing exists beyond the reach of logic, observation, and experimentation. To me, the world was a set of equations, laws of nature, and observable phenomena. I had no time for things like fate, supernatural signs, or anything that couldn't be measured and tested. Everything had to fit neatly into a scientific framework. If it couldn't be proven, then it wasn't real. That was my worldview, and I was proud of it. It was on a cold autumn afternoon when I bought the ring. I had just lost my old bracelet, the one I wore through high school. It was an accident, of course, something I had done while rushing to class one day. I wasn't particularly sentimental about it, but I felt the gap on my wrist. So I wandered into a pawn shop near campus and found the simplest silver ring, plain, unadorned, and without any stones or engravings. It cost $50, and it fit perfectly on my middle finger. I didn't think much of it beyond replacing my bracelet, but I slipped it on and went back to my apartment. That weekend, I went through the usual routine, studying for my thermodynamics exam, meeting with my lab partners to go over some complicated equations, attending a few lectures on statistical mechanics. Life was moving as usual, and I didn't give the ring a second thought. But on Monday morning, something strange happened. As I walked into my usual coffee shop on the way to campus, I felt something odd. The ring on my finger suddenly felt warm, not from the cold autumn air outside or from my body heat, but something else. It wasn't unbearably hot, just noticeably warmer than it had been all weekend. I paused for a moment, my fingers instinctively brushing the ring, trying to make sense of it. I didn't have a hot cup of coffee in my hand, and I hadn't touched anything that could have made it warm. I shrugged it off, assuming maybe I had just gotten used to the temperature in the shop. It's easy to convince yourself that something small like that is just your imagination playing tricks. So, I grabbed my coffee from Emily, the barista who always seemed too busy to chat, paid, and left. By the time I reached campus, the warmth had completely dissipated. I thought, okay, that was strange, but I dismissed it as nothing more than a momentary fluke. 3 days later, it happened again, and this time, I couldn't ignore it. I was in Dr. Jensen's office discussing my latest chemistry lab report. She's one of my favorite professors, sharp, witty, and the kind of person who made even the most complex concepts feel like they could be easily understood. We were mid-conversation, going over some of the finer details of my experimental approach, when I felt it again. The ring began to heat up, but this time, it wasn't like before. The warmth felt more intense, as if the metal itself had absorbed energy from somewhere else. I tried to focus on Dr. Jensen's feedback, but my eyes kept darting to my hand, watching the ring, puzzled. It didn't make sense. "Are you okay, Clara?" she asked, noticing my distraction. "Yeah, sorry, just my ring feels warm again," I muttered, trying to make sense of what was happening. Metals conduct heat. Maybe you brushed against something without realizing it?" Dr. Jensen suggested with a smile, clearly thinking it was a simple explanation. But I hadn't brushed against anything. My notebook had been sitting untouched on the desk the entire time. I wasn't holding anything that could have transferred heat. The warmth lasted for about a minute before fading, and I made a mental note to pay attention if it happened again. But I wasn't prepared for what would come next. 3 days after the incident with Dr. Jensen, I found myself in a situation I never expected. It was a Wednesday evening, and I'd reluctantly signed up for an art class with my friend Taylor. I'm not exactly what you'd call artsy. My world revolved around formulas, numbers, and the kind of logical precision that made sense to me. But Taylor insisted I try, so here I was, fumbling with a paintbrush and trying to stay in the lines of a still life. I wasn't any good, but the class wasn't bad either. It was a nice break from the usual grind of lab work and exams. The room was quiet, with soft music playing in the background. I was trying to focus on not ruining the still life I was painting when it happened again. The ring. It heated up, and this time it was undeniable. The warmth was not subtle like before. It was intense, almost as if it had become a part of me, radiating a heat I couldn't explain. I stared at my wrist, the metal glowing faintly in the dim light, and felt a wave of disbelief wash over me. How was this even possible? I was certain I hadn't touched anything that could cause it. Lily, the instructor, was walking around the room, helping students with their paintings. She approached me, and I flinched a little. Nothing intentional, just a reaction to the sudden rise in temperature on my skin. As she leaned in to adjust my brushstroke, the heat stayed constant. The moment she moved away, the warmth began to fade. My mind raced. The ring wasn't heating up because of my own body heat, and it wasn't from the environment. It was reacting to something, or someone else. But why? I tried to refocus on the painting, but my hand kept subconsciously reaching for the ring, as if to check if it was still warm. It was. When the class ended, I packed up my things in a daze. As I walked to the door, I glanced at Lily, who was packing up her supplies as well. Could she somehow be the trigger? Or was it just the strange coincidence of proximity? I wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. The ring was behaving in a way that defied all logic. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I made a plan. If the ring heated up in the presence of certain people, there had to be a pattern. I needed more data, more instances to make sense of what was going on. I started carrying a small thermometer with me, something I used for experiments in my physics lab. I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but I knew that the scientific method was the only way to approach this mystery. Observe, hypothesize, test, conclude. That's how I approached every problem. And this was no different. For the next week, I meticulously tracked every instance of the ring's warmth. I made notes of the time, the place, the people I was near. The results were astonishing in their consistency. The ring heated up when I was near Emily at the coffee shop, Dr. Jensen in her office, and Lily during the art class. No one else. The warmth wasn't a random fluctuation. It increased by 3 degrees every time, and the temperature peaked when I was within 1 meter of these individuals. If I moved away, the warmth faded. The pattern was irrefutable. But what could it mean? By the end of the week, I was obsessed. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was staring me in the face. The ring had to be reacting to something in these specific people. But what? I couldn't figure it out. Was there something physically different about them? I racked my brain, trying to think of any common trait. Emily, Dr. Jensen, and Lily were all so different in terms of profession, background, and personality. What connected them? There had to be something I was missing. I knew I needed help, and I wasn't about to let this mystery slip away. I had to find out what was going on, and I wasn't going to stop until I had an answer. So I decided to take the next step. I went to see Leo. He was a graduate student in electrical engineering, and he was one of the smartest people I knew. If anyone could help me analyze this ring, it was him. I showed him the ring and explained everything, every detail of the experiment I'd done. He raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the temperature changes. "This is way beyond what I would expect from a piece of jewelry," he said, his voice skeptical but intrigued. "Let me take a look." Leo took the ring into his lab, and I waited for what felt like an eternity. I was on the edge of my seat, wondering if he would find something that would explain everything. After what felt like hours, Leo finally called me back into the lab. He had an X-ray of the ring on his screen. "Clara," he said, "this isn't just a piece of jewelry. This thing has embedded circuitry, conductors, bioelectric sensors, even a thermal element designed to heat up under certain conditions. This isn't just an accident. Someone built this thing for a purpose." I stared at the screen, unable to believe what I was seeing. Embedded circuitry? Bioelectric sensors? It was like something out of a science fiction novel. This wasn't just a random pawn shop purchase. This ring had been designed with a purpose, and that purpose was far from clear. The mystery deepened, and now I needed to know who had made this ring and why. The more I learned about the ring, the more questions piled up, and the more unsettled I became. If this ring had been intentionally created with such advanced technology, then someone had built it for a reason. But who? And why? I couldn't stop thinking about it. The concept of bioelectric sensors and embedded circuitry felt so far beyond anything I'd ever come across in my physics studies. This wasn't just a random object. It was a device, a tool with a very specific purpose. I spent the next few days obsessing over what Leo had shown me. The idea that the ring was designed to react to people based on some kind of neurological or bioelectric signature made sense in theory, but in practice, it didn't. Why these people? Why Emily, Dr. Jensen, and Lily? They were strangers to each other, with no apparent link. None of them had anything in common, or at least, none that I could see. But I couldn't get past the nagging feeling that I was missing something obvious. The pattern was too precise, the heat response too consistent for it to be random. I was certain the ring was reacting to them because of something inside their biology, something measurable. But what was it? That was when I decided to find out who had made the ring. There had to be someone who could explain it. I went back to the pawn shop, hoping for a clue. The shop owner, Mr. Harris, remembered the sale right away. He told me that the ring had been sold by a man named Ryan Calloway, a 28-year-old who had come in a couple of months ago. According to Mr. Harris, Ryan had sold a few other items along with the ring. His mother had passed away recently, and he was looking to get rid of some of her things. I was stunned when I heard the mention of his mother's death. It seemed like the universe was throwing me another piece of the puzzle. After getting the name and phone number from Mr. Harris, I called Ryan that evening. It took a few rings before he answered. His voice was hesitant at first, but when I explained who I was and mentioned the ring, there was a slight pause on the other end. "This is Ryan. Who's this?" "My name is Clara. I bought a ring from the pawn shop, and I think you might know something about it. Would you be willing to meet? I think there's more to it than just a piece of jewelry." Ryan seemed intrigued but cautious. "The silver ring?" he asked. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Yeah, that was my mom's. It's kind of complicated." We agreed to meet the next day at a local cafe. When I saw him, Ryan looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were a little red, and he seemed both exhausted and lost, like someone who was still grieving and struggling to cope with the weight of recent events. He sat down across from me, and I slid the ring onto the table. "This was my mom's ring," he said softly, almost reverently. "Her name was Dr. Angela Calloway. She was a neuroscientist, one of the best in her field." I leaned forward, feeling the tension in the air. "What was her research about?" Ryan looked away for a moment, like he was gathering his thoughts. "She studied mirror touch synesthesia. It's a rare neurological condition where a person feels the pain or emotions of others as if they were their own. My mom, she could feel everything. Someone's physical pain, their emotional distress. It was both a gift and a curse." I was stunned. Mirror touch synesthesia? I had heard about it in passing, but I had no idea how much it could affect a person's life. Ryan continued, his voice growing softer. "She created this ring as part of her research. It was meant to help people with the condition find each other. Most people with mirror touch synesthesia think they're just too sensitive, or worse, they're told it's all in their head. She wanted to help them connect with others who could understand what they were going through." I looked at the ring on the table, suddenly realizing its true purpose. This wasn't just some odd piece of jewelry. It was a tool designed to identify and connect people with mirror touch synesthesia. My mind was racing. The warmth I'd felt when near Emily, Dr. Jensen, and Lily, it all made sense now. Those three people, the ones I couldn't explain, all had the same condition. The ring had been designed to detect their unique bioelectric signatures, their neurological patterns. "Why did you sell it?" I asked, unsure of what to expect. Ryan's face fell. "She passed away suddenly 2 years ago from a stroke. It was too much for her. The condition took a toll on her, physically and emotionally. After she died, I didn't know what to do with her things. I had to sell some of her equipment. I thought maybe it would help someone else, but I didn't realize it would be you." He wiped his eyes, his voice shaking. "I just wanted to get rid of it. But it wasn't just about the research. She was trying to help people, Clara. People who are like me, who are like you, people who feel things they can't explain, people who are different but don't know why." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. Ryan's mother had created the ring not as a gadget, but as a lifeline for people who struggled in ways most of the world couldn't understand. And now, somehow, I had found it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was not just about science. It was about human connection, about helping people who feel isolated because they experience the world in ways that others can't even imagine. "I think I know someone who could really use this," I said, my voice quieter now, filled with a new understanding. Ryan nodded slowly, a faint trace of hope in his eyes. "Who?" My friend, Kate, I said. She's been struggling with something like this for years. I think she has mirror touch synesthesia. Ryan's eyes widened slightly. Then the ring is hers. It was meant for people like her. As I left the cafe, the weight of what I had just learned settled on my shoulders. The ring wasn't just an artifact of someone's research. It was a connection, a way for people to understand each other when the rest of the world couldn't, and it had found its way to me. Now I had to pass it on. I had to help Kate understand what was happening to her, and I had to help her realize she wasn't alone. I couldn't stop thinking about Kate. I had known her for years, but over the last few, I had seen her retreat into herself more and more. She'd always been a quiet person, but in the last few months, it had gotten worse. She barely left her apartment, and when she did, it was only to go to work. She stopped coming to our usual weekend meetups, stopped replying to messages, and when I did see her, her eyes looked distant, like she wasn't really present, even when she was physically there. She seemed trapped inside a bubble of isolation, like something was weighing on her, but I could never get her to open up about it. When I left the cafe that day, I knew I had to talk to her about what I had learned. The ring, Ryan's mother's research, the condition, everything pointed to Kate needing this. But I had no idea how to explain it to her. How do you tell someone that the way they've been feeling for years isn't just in their head, that what they've been experiencing is a real, scientifically recognized condition? And how do you make them believe that they're not crazy, not weak, just different? That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the ring in my hand. It was strange, almost surreal. It had started as a random pawn shop purchase, something I never thought twice about. Now, it felt like it held the key to understanding Kate's entire world. I didn't even know where to start, so I decided to take it slow, to approach it gently. She had always been the sensitive type, and I didn't want to overwhelm her. The next morning, I drove home to see her. Our parents lived in the suburbs about an hour from campus, and I hadn't visited in a while. As I walked into the house, I found Kate in her usual spot, the room she had converted into her personal sanctuary. It wasn't exactly a typical bedroom. It was more like a cocoon of sorts, with books and blankets scattered everywhere. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, flipping through a notebook. Her face was pale, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. She didn't even look up when I walked in, and I felt a familiar pang of concern in my chest. "Hey," I said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed beside her. "Hey," she replied, her voice flat. She didn't make eye contact. I didn't want to push her, so I sat there for a minute, just letting the silence settle between us. I knew she wasn't doing well, but I didn't know how to make it better. After a few moments, I finally broke the silence. "I think I figured something out, Kate." She looked up at me, her expression wary. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I hesitated, unsure of how to frame it. "I think I've figured out what's been going on with you, what's been bothering you." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Remember how you've always said that being around people, feeling their emotions, it hurts, that it's like their pain becomes yours?" I watched her face closely, hoping she wouldn't shut me down. She nodded slowly, her eyes sad. "Yeah, but you've always told me it's just anxiety, that I'm just too sensitive." I know. Her voice dropped to a whisper, and she hugged her knees to her chest. I reached into my bag and pulled out the ring. I didn't know what I was expecting from her, but when I handed it to her, I saw something in her eyes, something that was a mix of curiosity and relief. "Kate," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "This ring is part of a real condition, and I think it might be what you've been dealing with." She glanced at the ring, her eyebrows furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" "Mirror touch synesthesia," I said, the words almost sounding foreign to my own ears. "It's a condition where you physically feel what other people are feeling. It's not just empathy, it's literal. If someone's in pain, you feel it too. If someone's sad, you experience that sadness as if it's your own." She stared at me for a moment, her mouth slightly open. "You think that's what's happening to me?" "I think it is. I've learned all about it, Kate. There's even a device, a ring, that can detect this condition. People who have it, they feel everything, and you've been struggling with it for so long without knowing why." She looked down at the ring in her hand, turning it over. "But I've never been able to explain it to anyone. People just think I'm weak, I guess, that I can't handle being around others. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the rush of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. You're not weak. You're not crazy, Kate, and you're not alone. There's a whole community of people who feel the same way you do, people who understand exactly what you're going through. Her eyes welled up with tears as she stared at the ring. I I thought it was just me, that I was the only one who couldn't handle being around people, that I was broken. I shook my head gently. You're not broken. You just experienced the world in a way that most people can't even imagine. And now you don't have to do it alone. We sat in silence for a while after that, the weight of everything hanging between us. I had always known Kate was sensitive, but seeing her like this, seeing her finally understand what was happening to her, felt like a huge relief. It was as though a door had opened and I could see hope in her eyes for the first time in a long while. "Can I wear it?" she asked, breaking the silence. I smiled, a sense of peace settling in me. "Of course. It's yours, Kate. It's always been meant for someone like you." She slid the ring onto her finger, and I saw the weight lift from her shoulders, even if just a little. The ring wasn't just a device. It was a symbol of connection, a way for her to finally understand that she wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something better for her, a way to heal and begin to feel understood in a world that had often felt too overwhelming. Over the next few weeks, I watched Kate transform. It was subtle at first, but I noticed it. She started leaving her apartment more often, and when I saw her, there was a glimmer of something in her eyes, a spark of life that I hadn't seen in months. She was still the same quiet person, but the sadness and isolation that had consumed her seemed to be fading, piece by piece. And I couldn't help but feel grateful for the ring, for what it had helped uncover. At first, I wasn't sure how much of Kate's change could be attributed to the ring itself. After all, understanding her condition was only the beginning. I knew she would still have a lot to work through. But the fact that she finally had a name for what she was experiencing, that she wasn't alone anymore, made all the difference. She no longer felt like she was living in a world where no one understood her pain, because now she knew that there were people who could relate. One afternoon, I visited her at her apartment. She'd started spending more time at a small cafe near her place, getting more comfortable being around people again. I had invited her out for coffee, but when I got to her apartment, she was already there, reading a book. She looked up at me, and I was struck by how different she seemed. She wasn't hiding behind a wall of silence or retreating into herself. There was a calmness about her, like she was finally in control of the emotions that used to overwhelm her. "How's it going?" I asked, taking a seat across from her. "Better," she replied, her voice steady. "I've been reading more about mirror touch synesthesia, and it's helping. It feels good to know that I'm not the only one who experiences this. It's kind of a relief, you know?" I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my own chest. "I'm glad. I've been thinking about the ring, too. It's so much more than just a way to detect the condition. It's a tool to help people connect. It's like a lifeline for those who have been suffering without knowing why." Kate smiled faintly and placed her hand on the table. I watched as she fiddled with the ring on her finger, the same one I had given her. "I've been thinking about that too," she said, her voice thoughtful. "I've been wanting to talk to other people who experience this, to see if they feel the same way. I want to help people understand this condition. I don't want anyone to go through what I've been through without knowing what's really going on." I was taken aback by how much Kate had changed in such a short time. It was clear she wasn't just processing her own struggles anymore. She was starting to think about how she could help others, how she could make a difference. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She wasn't just coping. She was growing, and it was incredible to watch. "That's amazing, Kate," I said, my voice filled with admiration. "I think you could help a lot of people. There are so many out there who think they're crazy or that they're just too sensitive. But what you're doing, what you're saying, is giving people hope. You're showing them they're not alone." She looked up at me, her eyes bright with determination. "I want to create a space for people like us, a place where they don't have to feel ashamed or misunderstood. I've started writing about it, my experiences, what it feels like. I want to share it online, maybe start a blog or a support group. If it helps just one person, then it's worth it. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The Kate who had once been so closed off, so afraid of being judged, was now ready to open up to the world. She was ready to be the voice for others who had suffered in silence for years. It was a huge step for her, and I couldn't have been prouder. "That's incredible," I said, my heart swelling with pride. "You're going to make a real difference, Kate. People need to hear what you have to say." She smiled, but there was something else in her eyes, a quiet, unspoken gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you, without the ring. It helped me understand myself, and it's helping me help others. I don't think I would have had the courage to talk about it if I hadn't realized that what I'm going through is real, that it's okay to feel what I feel." I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of her words. It wasn't just the ring or the science behind it that had made the difference. It was the understanding. It was the way Kate had learned to embrace her condition, to see it as something that wasn't broken or wrong, but simply a part of who she was. And now, she was helping others to do the same. As we sat there, talking about her plans to reach out to others and share her story, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led to this point. A simple ring, bought on a whim, had set off a chain of events that had changed both of our lives. It had opened my eyes to something I hadn't fully understood before: the power of empathy, the power of truly understanding what someone else is going through, even if you can't see it, even if you can't feel it yourself. I knew the journey wasn't over for Kate. There would be challenges ahead, but she wasn't alone anymore. And neither was I. The ring, the research, everything. It wasn't just a story about science or about a mysterious object. It was about people, about connection, about feeling seen, understood, and supported. And in that moment, I realized how important it was to be a part of that change, to help someone see that they weren't broken, just different. Kate was well on her way to helping others, and I couldn't wait to see where she would go next. It was only the beginning. Over the next few months, everything changed. Kate's blog began to take off. She wrote about her experience with mirror-touch synesthesia, sharing the challenges, the confusion, and the relief she felt once she finally understood what was happening to her. At first, it was a small, quiet space where a few people left comments. But as time passed, more and more individuals reached out. They shared their own stories, their own struggles, and it became clear that Kate's words were helping people in ways I hadn't imagined. I watched from the sidelines, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride. Kate had always been the quiet one, the one who shied away from the spotlight, but here she was, sharing her vulnerability with the world. It wasn't easy for her. There were moments when the pressure of exposing herself felt too much, but she kept going. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. People thanked her for helping them understand what they had been feeling for years, but couldn't put into words. They felt seen, and in turn, they were beginning to heal. It was nothing short of incredible. As her blog grew, Kate started connecting with people all over the world. She received emails, messages, and even video calls from individuals who had the same condition. They wanted to talk, to share their experiences, to understand what it all meant. Kate wasn't just writing anymore. She was building a community, a safe place for people who had spent years feeling isolated, misunderstood, or even crazy. She had found her purpose, and it wasn't just about herself anymore. It was about helping others who had walked the same lonely path. At one point, she received a message that really stuck with me. It was from a woman in her early 30s who had lived with mirror-touch synesthesia her entire life. She'd never been diagnosed, never known there was a name for what she was going through. She had thought she was too sensitive, weak, and that her emotions and physical responses to others were a flaw in her character. After reading Kate's blog, she realized she wasn't broken. She wasn't weak. She was different. And that difference was something to embrace, not hide from. That message left both Kate and me in tears. It was the kind of impact Kate had never imagined she'd have, but it was real. I couldn't help but feel awe at how far she'd come. The Kate who once couldn't even leave her apartment without feeling overwhelmed was now connecting with people across the globe, helping them navigate their own experiences. She had found strength in vulnerability, and through her own healing journey, she was guiding others toward theirs. But it wasn't just the blog that had changed her. As Kate connected with others, she started pushing herself further. She began attending support group meetings, talking to professionals who specialized in synesthesia, and learning more about how to manage her own condition. She even started experimenting with techniques that helped her create mental boundaries, ways to differentiate between her own feelings and those of others. There was still a long way to go, and she wasn't completely healed, but she had a toolkit now, a sense of control that she had never had before. One evening, she called me after a particularly challenging day. "Clara," she said, her voice tinged frustration, "I had a moment today. I was at a cafe, and someone nearby was in a lot of pain. I felt it. I felt everything. It was overwhelming, but then I remembered what I'd learned. I managed to step back. I didn't let it consume me." I could hear the pride in her voice. She had faced a difficult situation, and instead of retreating or letting it swallow her, she had confronted it head on and taken control. That was the turning point for her, I realized. She wasn't just coping anymore. She was thriving, managing her condition in ways she never thought possible. As much as I had been a part of this journey, I started to realize how much I had learned from Kate too. Watching her grow, watching her open up and help others, made me see things from a different perspective. I had always been the one with the answers, the one who understood science and logic, but Kate had found something deeper. She had found the ability to help others feel understood, to make them feel less alone. That was a power I could never have imagined in a textbook. Soon after that call, I came across something that made me smile. Kate had decided to take her message further. She started working with Ryan to complete his mother's research. They were looking into ways to connect people with mirror-touch synesthesia on a broader scale, creating a platform that would offer support, resources, and community for those affected by the condition. It wasn't just a blog anymore. It was a movement. Kate was no longer just my quiet, introverted friend who had once struggled to understand herself. She was a leader, a beacon of hope for those who felt invisible. She had taken her pain and turned it into something powerful, something that would ripple out and touch many more lives. Sitting in my room, thinking back on everything, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The ring had started as an oddity, something I couldn't explain, but now it was a symbol of so much more. It had led me to Kate's journey, and in turn, it had opened a world of possibilities for her and for others like her. The impact had spread far beyond anything I could have predicted, and I knew it was only just beginning. The ring had changed everything, not just for Kate, but for everyone whose life it touched. It's strange how things come full circle. Just a few months ago, I never would have imagined that a simple silver ring from a pawn shop would lead to all of this. My sister Kate, finally understanding herself, helping countless others, and even starting a community for people with mirror-touch synesthesia. Yet here we were, in the middle of a process I could hardly wrap my mind around. We'd started with an unexpected discovery and ended up with a movement, a real change for so many people who had felt invisible for so long. Kate was no longer just the quiet, reserved person I had once known. She was stronger, more confident, and, most importantly, she was empowered. Watching her grow over these past months had been nothing short of inspiring. Her blog had gained a large following, and soon she was receiving messages not only from individuals, but from doctors, therapists, and researchers who wanted to collaborate on understanding mirror-touch synesthesia and its effects. It was overwhelming at times, but Kate handled it with grace. She didn't let the attention change her or overwhelm her. She stayed grounded in the reason she started, to help people understand that they weren't alone, to help them find a way to cope. One night, I sat with her in her apartment after a long day of meetings with researchers. She was tired, her eyes heavy with the exhaustion that came from constantly being on call for people who needed her advice. Yet when she spoke, there was a fire in her voice that I hadn't heard before. "I've been thinking," she said, glancing up from her laptop. "There's more to this, more to what I can do. I think I can help others go through this journey the same way I did. Not just writing about it, but teaching them how to manage their condition. I don't want anyone to go through what I did, not knowing, not understanding. I want them to know it's okay to feel. I could see the determination in her eyes. She was already making plans, working with a few of the researchers who had reached out to her. Together, they were coming up with ways to help people understand the neurological processes behind mirror touch synesthesia and develop coping strategies. She had even started to offer virtual workshops where people could come together and share their stories, learn techniques to manage their emotions, and simply be heard. I couldn't help but smile. Kate had always been kind, always caring, but now she was leading. She was becoming a force of change, not only for herself, but for everyone who had struggled with this condition. She had given people a voice when they thought they had none. And it wasn't just her own personal journey anymore. It was about the entire community she had built, the ripple effect of understanding that was slowly but surely spreading. As she continued to talk about her plans for the future, my mind wandered back to the moment when she first received the ring. At the time, I had no idea what it would mean for her, for both of us. All I knew was that I had found something that was clearly important, something that could explain the things she had felt for so long. But I never expected it to lead us here, to this place where she had the power to not only heal herself, but also offer healing to others. One evening, after one of Kate's virtual support group sessions, she called me. I could hear the smile in her voice even before she spoke. "Clara, you won't believe it," she said. "I just got off a call with someone who's been living with this condition for years. They had no idea it even had a name. They thought they were just going crazy. And after talking to me, they finally feel seen. They said they could breathe again. Can you imagine that? After all these years, they feel like they're not alone anymore." I felt my heart swell. That was the power of what Kate was doing. She was giving people freedom, freedom from the crushing loneliness and confusion that often comes with an invisible condition. She was changing lives, one person at a time. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Kate, you're doing more than just helping people understand their condition. You're helping them live. You're giving them the courage to face the world without the weight of feeling different, of feeling like they don't belong. That's incredible." She laughed softly. "I never thought I'd be here, you know. But I'm glad I am. And I couldn't have done it without you, Clara. You helped me understand what was going on with me in the first place. You gave me the push I needed." I couldn't help but shake my head. "You did this, Kate. You took the first step. You made the decision to face it and to help others. You're the one who turned everything around." She was quiet for a moment. "I couldn't have done it alone," she whispered. "I never could have done it alone." I didn't know what to say to that. The truth was, she didn't need to do it alone anymore. She had built a community, one that was supporting her and each other in ways I never imagined. The ring, the blog, the conversations, the workshops, it had all come together to create something much bigger than I had ever expected. As I sat there thinking about everything Kate had accomplished, I realized that this was what it was all about. It wasn't just about solving a mystery or understanding a condition. It was about connecting, about seeing people for who they truly were, beyond what was visible on the surface. And Kate had found a way to make sure that others saw that, too. I sat back and smiled, knowing that the journey was far from over. For Kate, and for the people she was helping, this was just the beginning. The ring had changed everything, yes, but it was the community, the understanding, the empathy that would truly make all the difference. And that was something no one could take away from her, or from any of them. In life, it's important to embrace both vulnerability and self-understanding. Sometimes the struggles we face can feel isolating, but remember that you're not alone, even if it seems that way. Seek to understand yourself deeply, acknowledging what makes you unique and different, rather than seeing it as a weakness. Reach out, share your experiences, and connect with others who understand. You may not have all the answers right away, but taking that first step towards self-awareness and connection can transform not only your life, but the lives of those around you. Empathy and community are powerful forces for healing and growth.